We must all become part of public policy discourse and implementation. Africa is a continent that has invested significantly in enabling legal and policy frameworks for climate action. What Africa needs today is to bridge the implementation gap that needs over 3 trillion US dollars. But in addition to this, the passion and visionary and boldness of the citizenry to take this up to drive climate action solutions is what is also needed. But let's face it, most countries in the continent today aim to do this through greening agricultural value chains. They aim to do this through sustainable forest management. They aim to do this through increasing energy supply and improving energy efficiency. Some of them, the countries, are putting in place renewable energy mix to achieve this by 2035. But here's the point. Even if all the countries have all the money, they will never be able to reach this 30 to 32% ambition until they put in place policy signals that the citizenry can tap to drive actions that help realize their visions and cut down emissions. So, what needs to be done? Well, what we know is that favorable government policies can play a big role, especially when it comes to physical incentives or physical interventions. A case in point is environmental physical policies that can stimulate innovation, that can stimulate investments in the energy sectors. If you take, for example, tax exemptions on solar, tax exemption on clean cooking stove products, tax exemption on briquettes and burgers, this has been done in other countries and can be leveraged. And these have actually shifted not just market shifts, but also mindset shifts. Up to 80% of the entire African population depends on fuel wood and charcoal. And this clearly indicates a market gap. It indicates a market opportunity for young people who are guided to invest in waste recovery to clean cooking solutions and climate action areas to tap into. Scrapping away value added tax on fuel briquettes, on burgers will enhance livelihoods. But three things needs to happen for this to take stage: regulatory limitations, human factors of preference and demand, and stabilizing supply by tapping local innovations by the informal sector is key to be understood. Because policy incentives implies that government needs to put in place a way in which to stimulate investments in clean cooking and others. Countries can pave the way with a finance bill that exempts all classes of clean cooking and energy from value added tax, gas equipment, sustainable fuel briquettes, etc. This will be a direct policy signal for investments, be it operational actors, including ordinary citizenry, to invest in these classes of clean cooking. This how you can bring impact to scale on climate action, and this can be done. The second aspect is that regardless of the progressiveness of policies, implementation depends on the willingness of the operational actors who are the real implementers of policies. This means that regardless of an enabling policy, citizenry willingness is key. Citizens' willingness is very important and can never be ignored. That's why we need to inspire them. The third aspect is that catalyzing innovations in clean cooking to increase availability is key. Take fuel briquettes, for example. These are non-capital intensive areas, simple technologies accessible to the informal sector that form up to 80% of work in the continent. And the youth can be able to be leveraged to apply to convert agricultural waste into simple fuel briquettes that burn 3 to 4 times more effective and can tap into the 20 billion charcoal industry. Increased availability of briquettes, of burgers in the market will help shift the needle. For example, biogas access in the entire continent today is just as 1% lower than kerosene and charcoal. So, innovations to drive this, to increase the availability of clean, accessible, and affordable cooking options are urgently needed, given that 84% of Africans depend on, on clean energy. But one thing we need to understand is that policy only make meaning when people seize it and implement it to create opportunities. So, do not look for answers elsewhere. The answers are with you and me.